If you're listening to this, you probably grew up hearing your name said in a certain tone, not with warmth, not with curiosity, with exhaustion, with frustration, with that particular heaviness that made you feel like your very existence was a problem someone hadn't signed up to solve. You learned very early that to be yourself was to be too much, too loud, too sensitive, too angry, too needy, too strange, and quietly, without anyone noticing, maybe without even you noticing, you began to believe them. Today, we're going to sit with something most people carry their entire lives without ever naming it: the psychological weight of being the child who was labeled the problem. Not because they were broken, but because they were misread, and what that misreading does to a person, how it shapes the way they move through the world, the way they love, the way they shrink or explode. That is what we're here to gently uncover. In-depth psychology, particularly in the tradition of Carl Jung. Every family operates as a system, and like all systems, it needs balance, it needs order. And sometimes, often, that order is maintained by quietly assigning roles. There is the golden child, the peacemaker, the invisible one, and then there is the identified patient. This is the clinical term, but forget the clinical world for a moment. In plain human language, the identified patient is the child who becomes the container for everything the family cannot face about itself. The anxiety nobody speaks about, the marriage that is quietly breaking, the grief that was never processed, the rage that has no acceptable outlet. That child acts out. That child cries too much. That child can't focus in school. That child is difficult. And every adult in the room breathes a small, unconscious sigh of relief, because now there is a reason. Now there is a name for the tension. Now the problem lives in one small body, and everything else can continue pretending to be fine. This is not about blame. Most parents who did this were never aware they were doing it. They were simply repeating what was done to them, passing down an emotional debt they didn't know they were carrying. But the child doesn't know that. The child only knows one thing: I am the reason things are hard here. And that knowing lodges itself somewhere deep, somewhere below language, in the body, in the nervous system, in the part of the brain that learns safety before it learns words. Imagine a boy, maybe 7 years old. He has a lot of energy. He asks too many questions. He gets bored quickly and starts making noise when he's bored, because nobody taught him what to do with the electricity running through his body. His teacher is overwhelmed. His parents are exhausted from their own lives. And every time he disrupts, every time he needs, the response he receives is not curiosity. It is correction, punishment, isolation. What does a 7-year-old learn from this? Not how to regulate, not how to understand himself. He learns, my inner world is a burden to others. He learns, when I am fully myself, people I love become frustrated with me. He learns, to be loved, I must become smaller. But here is the paradox, and this is important: he can't become smaller. Because the energy, the sensitivity, the need for connection, those are not flaws. They are his nature. So instead of shrinking, he oscillates. He shrinks, then explodes. He apologizes, then lashes out. He tries to be good, fails, then stops trying entirely. And every cycle confirms what they already believe. He is the problem. What nobody sees is that his behavior is not pathology. It is communication. It is a nervous system desperately trying to say, I need something. I am not getting it. And I don't have the words. Now imagine a girl. Quiet this time. She learned earlier than the boy that noise brings consequences. So she went inward. She became sensitive to everyone's moods, her mother's silences, her father's jaw when it tightened, the shift in the air before an argument. She became extraordinarily good at reading rooms, at disappearing when needed, at being helpful, pleasant, low maintenance. From the outside, she didn't look like a problem child. But she was still carrying the label, just differently. She was the reason mom got headaches, the reason dad worked late. She would hear it in small ways: you're too sensitive, You're too emotional. Why do you make everything so difficult? And she internalized it so completely that as an adult, she cannot receive love without waiting for it to be taken away. She cannot succeed without expecting punishment. She cannot rest without guilt. Her body learned, existing fully is dangerous. Needing things is dangerous. You are, at your core, too much and not enough simultaneously. This is what attachment theory calls an anxious or disorganized attachment pattern. When the people who are supposed to make you feel safe are also the source of your fear or shame, your entire relationship with closeness becomes complicated. You crave it and distrust it at exactly the same time. You reach for people and pull away. You love deeply and expect abandonment. Not because something is wrong with you, but because your nervous system learned love and danger from the same source. Here is what is almost never said about the child who was always the problem. They were often the most emotionally intelligent person in the room. They felt everything. They noticed everything. They absorbed the unspoken tension, the hidden resentments, the things that were never named. And because they felt it all so loudly, they reacted. They acted it out. They became the symptom of a sickness that lived in the system around them, not inside them. This is the great misunderstanding. The child who was the problem was often the child doing the most honest thing in the room, responding to reality as it actually was, not as the adults needed it to appear. Their sensitivity was not a disorder. Their anger was not a character flaw. Their sadness was not manipulation. These were accurate responses to inaccurate environments. And instead of being understood, they were diagnosed, disciplined, dismissed. The misconception that follows these children into adulthood is this: that they are fundamentally difficult, that relationships will always be hard for them, that they are wired for chaos. But what is actually true is this: they are wired for depth. They feel things deeply because they always have. They react strongly because no one ever helped them learn another way. They struggle in relationships not because they are incapable of love, but because they learned love inside conditions that made it feel unsafe. The behavior that looked like a problem was always a form of intelligence, a survival strategy. The psyche protecting itself the only way it knew how, given what it had been given. So what do you do with this, if this is you? You don't fix it by forcing yourself to be different. You don't heal it by becoming more palatable, more controlled, more convenient for others. You begin by sitting with a question, not to answer it immediately, but to hold it gently. What was I actually trying to communicate back then, when no one was listening? What were you carrying that wasn't yours to carry? What feelings were you expressing that belonged to the room around you, not to something broken inside you? Because here is what is true, and what perhaps no one has said to you clearly enough. You were not the problem. You were the messenger. And the message was real, even if no one was ready to receive it. There is a kind of grief that comes with realizing this. A grief for the child who tried so hard to be understood, who changed themselves, shrunk themselves, exploded themselves, trying to find the shape that would finally make them safe. Let yourself feel that grief. It is not weakness. It is the beginning of something more honest than anything the adults around you were able to offer. You are not too much. You never were. You were just in rooms that were too small for what you carried. And if no one ever told you that, I'm telling you now. If this found you at the right moment, consider subscribing. There's more waiting here, for the people who have always felt things a little too deeply to pretend otherwise. And if something in this felt familiar, something you've carried a long time but never had words for, leave it in the comments. You don't have to explain it fully. Sometimes just saying "I know this feeling" is enough.